guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 81. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where we're talking about my painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 YouTube videos a week. Ow! Could you possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, Games Workshop came out with some new Assassins, sort of. They're for 30K. I feel like I always start every Models Memories like that, sort of. But Games Workshop keeps coming out with the same thing, but a little bit different. And this week it was the Assassins. There are 3 new Assassins for 30K. The Venom Assassin, the Vanus Infocyte Assassin, and the Claude Adamus Assassin. John Claude Van Danimus Assassin. And one of these I really, really like. The Vanus Infocyte Assassin looks really, really cool. It's clearly kind of a Caluxus assassin. She's got like a fitted body glove and then like a really weird robot faceless mask. Although the classic Psyker Assassin has like a skull mask, where this mask is just blank in the face. And I almost feel like the paint job that they did on it kind of adds a little bit of a face. The rivets and the highlights on the top of the helmet kind of create a face. Humans tend to try to identify faces all the time, but I think it'd be really cool to paint this just flat, just so that it's like almost a headless look. But yeah, I really like this assassin. I think it's really neat. It's got kind of some Doc Ock tentacle looking things with the servo skulls attached to the backpack and a spooky little tail coming out the back. I really like this assassin. It's really nice. It's really painted well. The base is nothing special. Games Workshop tends to change up their basing style a little bit here and there. Most of the time, it's just brown earth with a little bit of green grass, and it's subtle. It looks good, and it's mostly pretty forgettable and ignorable, which is fine when you're really trying to show off the product that you actually sell, which is the miniature standing on the base. And the actual basing scheme is really up to the individual modeler. But this one is just sand, like just gravelly sand. It's kind of weird. But this assassin I like a lot. And the other 2 assassins, well, the Claude Venomous Assassin kind of looks a little heavy. And I'm fine with you know, fat guy models. I like it, it's fun. But for an assassin that is all about sneaking in and poisoning people, I don't know, it's kind of a weird look. It's also weird, the posing. He's got his foot up on a small steampunk box, and he's really kind of presenting his front to the camera, but then he's kind of looking off to the side. I don't know. It might be like if they took this model and just twisted it 30 degrees. Obviously that wouldn't show off as much of the model, but maybe that's the beauty angle of this miniature. Yeah, and it also, they've painted his arms and legs one color, and then they painted his torso another color, and it kind of makes it look like he's wearing like a tank top, like a weird purpley tank top over his body glove. It's a weird look. They painted these 30K assassins a lot more muted and desaturated than they typically do the classic 40K assassins. I think a little bringing the contrast and color saturation up on these would probably help a lot. But I don't know. This model, it's not flimmin' my flams. It's not Jimmy and my jams. It's not buttering my toast. It's not jingling my bells. It's fine, but it doesn't seem like something special. I will be interested though to see what price point these guys come out at, because I believe the 40K assassins cost $38 a piece. And they're smaller than Imperial Guard. They are tiny, tiny little models, and they cost so much money for some reason. I think I said this in a video one time, that they should sell all 4 assassins in one box. And you know, the box can be sort of expensive because Games Workshop has to be expensive for some reason. But yeah, each individual assassin being really expensive is, I'm not a fan. And next up, we got the John Claude Van Damme assassin. I like him more than the Venomous, but I don't know. I think it's the pose is a little awkward. I think this one also is not being displayed at the perfect beauty angle for this miniature. Also, the face is very G.I. Joe. It's really kind of weird looking. Like, clearly he's wearing I don't know, like a balaclava or like a really tight fitting face mask. And I don't really get why there's this hard plastic shell over his nose and mouth, and it's pushing against the material, the fabric, but then his ear is just, there's just a little bit of cloth just gently pressing it down. It looks weird to me. Maybe that's just a costume designer in me, being like, those two materials don't feel like they mesh well. And then clearly you can see just his natural eye. And so clearly he does the Batman thing where, before Batman gets all suited up, he takes out his little black mascara and he just puts a little bit around his eyes so that you can't see the his pale skin right around the eye holes of his mask. I don't know, that's a lot. I talked about his head for a while, but that's the thing that really jumped out at me is it doesn't really look 40K. It doesn't look super, super cool. I like his big dumb stapler gun. I think that's fun. I like his sword, but it is weird. He's shooting his gun and about to draw his sword. I almost think if I was purchasing this model, I would take his head and I would rotate it in the direction of his sword, like he's doing a no-look shoot like Han Solo, while he's focusing on chopping down somebody in front of him. The basing is also nothing special, and I feel like if I was pulling this model off, I would add, like he's like that foot that's pushing off of the ground. I think I would add a little piece of building or rubble or rock for him to really be pushing off of to help sell this running forward with his torso awkwardly straight up pose. I don't know, these two assassins, they just didn't catch me, but I really like the Infocyte Assassin. I think that model is really cool, and I could see getting that model instead of the classic Culexus Assassin. Speaking of assassinations, in the last episode, I brought up that I really wanted the Joy Toy Castellan Crow Grey Knight guy, who's really, really cool, but I was really hoping that they would do a Grey Knight Terminator. Well, about half of the comments on that video were telling me that model in fact exists and is available for pre-order. And I took a look at it and it's really cool. The Warhammer 40K Grey Knight Brotherhood Terminator Squad team member 1/18th scale figure is really, really cool. They heightened him just a little bit from the classic model, which I've actually heightened all of my Grey Knight Terminators by putting a little blob of green stuff in between their legs and torso, because older Games Workshop models are short and the Grey Knights are old, so they needed a little bit of help. I also added a little bit of plastic in between their foot because for some reason, and this is sort of true on new Primaris Space Marines too, they look like they're wearing Ugg boots. Like their toe just goes straight into the ground and they don't have a giant sole and heel. Like if you look at like modern military boots, there's a lot of rubber under your foot to protect you from the ground and temperature and all this stuff. But 40K models, for some reason, they have a really, really, really thin heel, and it doesn't make them look, it doesn't make their feet look as impressive as they could. Yes, I'm getting into feet. But it's just a very, very small complaint I have for the old Grey Knight models, and so I would bring it up. Actually, these Joy Toy models do have a little bit more foot than the actual plastic models, which I like. I think these models are great. I love this action figure, and I'm probably gonna buy one. But one tricky thing with Space Marines in proportions and Terminators in proportions a lot is the proportions don't work. And to get all the articulation into this model, they had to have the arms very separate from the torso. And so it does make him even wider than a classic Terminator is, because with regular Space Marines, you can kind of cheat it a little bit. You glue on their arm and then the shoulder pad kind of overlaps the shoulder and it overlaps a good chunk of the side of that torso armor. And so it helps kind of bring their silhouette in a little bit and not make them look so broad in the shoulder. But because they have to have the articulation in there, they had to widen that a little bit. So the shoulders are a little bit wide, although I wonder if I can fix that when the model is in my hand and maybe shave down some pegs or do a little milliputting and just make this perfect. The paint application, if this representation on the website is true, is very, very nice. I still think I would do a little bit of touching up with some miniature paint, but I really like this model. I really have been enjoying that video game Chaos Gate, and it'll be really fun to play Chaos Gate with having this little guy sitting there next to me, keeping watch. I could even build him in the game because there's a little bit of character customization And then I guess if he dies, I have to destroy the action figure. I think that'll be the rule. But yeah, I really like it. I really like this Terminator model. It's really, really cool. It'll be the second 40K action figure I get, because I also got the McFarlane Space Marine, which I painted as a Lamenter's Space Marine, and I really liked it. Although the plastic was very vinyl-y, it's kind of a rubbery material, and the paint did not want to stick to it. If I were to take like my fingernail and scratch it, paint would come right off. And speaking of things that are really, really cool, and I kind of want to buy, Games Workshop, I think this was actually several weeks ago, they showed off some keychains, and I remember they've previously made keychains, and they were rather lame. A really cool keychain came with the Dominion box. If you pre-ordered it, you got a really cool squig keychain. That was awesome. And then, no, it wasn't a squig. It was the shield of the orcs, the Orruk, the swamp orcs, the mean orcs, cruel boys. The cruel boy orc shield as a keychain, an enamel keychain, and it was really nice. Also with that pre-order, you also got a small Age of Sigmar pin, which I kind of enjoyed, and I put it on my apron and it immediately broke. So maybe I'll get a new pin back and try to fix that. I don't even know where it is. It might have just fallen on the ground and gotten swept up and thrown away. But yeah, so they've made one cool keychain in the past. There was another keychain that they made that was a little bit neat. It was a bolt shell, and I remember looking at it, but I think it was $15. I'm like, it's not a $15 cool bolt shell. So I didn't end up getting any of the Games Workshop keychains, but Games Workshop showed off some new ones and they look pretty sick. They are from Starforged, the Chaos Chain Axe, the Astra Militarum Las Gun, the Mastercrafted Bolt Rifle, and an Orc Choppa keychain. And they look really, really nice. They're cast in like a shiny gold color pop metal, and then they're given a nice like a tarnished look they just rub black paint on it and then rubbed it off. But it looks really nice, and it really brings out all of the details. The las gun is probably the safest bet in terms of like sitting in your pocket and being comfortable on your keys. But who wants just a plain old las gun? Also, the Chaos Chain Axe makes me wonder if it would hurt you. Like, it looks sharp, honestly. I forget the name of this part of a weapon, but like on like a pole arm or something, it'll have, your blade in the front and then it'll have a big spike in the back, and that's how the Chaos Chain Axe is. And that actually looks kind of sharp. I don't think it'll hurt you, but it might be a little bit uncomfortable. So, which is too bad because it does look like a cool thing. The Orc Choppa is phenomenal. It looks really cool. It's very fun, very orky. And the Mastercrafted Bolt Rifle is inspired. I really like it. I think that is the one that I'm gonna pick up and put on my keychain. It looks really, really nice. It's hard to believe that the paint application is gonna be as nice as it appears on the Games Workshop web store, but it looks really, really good. I also like that it's a Mastercrafted Bolt Rifle. They've added more details. The only thing that worries me a little bit is the Aquila on it, because Games Workshop and their imagery, it works beautifully in fiction. It's a very, very fun, grim, dark, dystopian world to visit. But I don't know if I want to bring any of that world with me into the real world when I'm like getting food at Denny's. And there's something that looks a little sketchy, like a little something from, a historical time period. And there's no way to talk your way out of it. If somebody's like, is that what I think it is? And they're like, no. So there's this game that has a book series and a world surrounding it. And in the book, things are really like, you wouldn't wear a 1984 shirt. It's just InSock is great. That wouldn't be something that would be fun to wear. I have the same problem. I love the Watchmen book series. I guess it's not a book series, it's one book, but then the Doomsday Clock just came out a few years ago and I really enjoyed that. I love the Zack Snyder movie. I love the character of Rorschach. And the actor who played him, Jackie Earle Haley, is my height. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be perfect. I like to cosplay. I would love to cosplay as Rorschach. But Rorschach is also a horrible, horrible person who does bad things. And I understand it's fine to be the bad guy for fun, but certain bad guys are, I think, acceptable bad guys like Darth Vader or Stormtroopers. And some baddies are maybe a little bit poor taste for walking around a convention floor at 7:30 in the morning. Where did I get to? Oh yeah, keychains with the Imperial Aquila on them. Yeah, so, but it's so small. It's no one would ever recognize or notice that. So the mastercrafted bullet rifle keychain is really, really cool. And good job, Games Workshop, for actually making cool swag, because a lot of their swag is really lame, just like mugs. You know, it's just, it costs them a penny to have made, and then they sell it to you for $30. But the keychains are nice, and I will probably pick up the bolt rifle. And in even more news of things I find very cool and might purchase, Army Painter put out a really interesting video. The Army Painter put out a really interesting video called We Hear You. And it was talking about how they have taken the criticism of their standard paint line, and they are putting in more mixing balls, and that they are open to community feedback and changing their products in order to make them better. I really, really like the Army Painter as a company. I really like their products. I have found that their regular colors are hit and miss. I bought a bunch secondhand, and so I don't know what kind of environment they were sitting around in before. The tricky thing with miniature paint is we give up a lot of quality things for convenience things. Like, Games Workshop and their pots. The pots have a tendency to gum up and dry up. Dropper bottles have a tendency for the tips to crack and to gunk up. And the best way to have paint is in foil or plastic tubes, because it keeps out all of the air and it keeps out all of the light. That is how acrylic paint should be. But for the convenience, we have it in pots and droppers. And so we trade, there's a little bit of a trade-off there. So I bought these Army Painter paints off of a guy, and some colors I just could never get back to life. There was a green that I ended up just throwing away because I shook it and shook it and shook it. I put in mixing balls and shook it and shook it, shook it. I couldn't get it to come back to life. But there are some colors that I really, really liked. The black and white are fantastic, and I really like demonic yellow. I've been on the hunt for good yellows because I used Games Workshops for years and they were terrible. And I actually really like Army Painter Demonic Yellow. And I do use Army Painter paints from time to time. I really, really like their wash range. I think their wash range is phenomenal. They are a really, really good mix of color saturation and just the technical ability to flow into the recesses and really darken those areas. And since Games Workshop just changed the formula of Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade, which I think probably were the best wash paints in existence, and I've heard good things about the new formula, I was just so used to the old formula that I'm a little bit dubious of using the new products, especially since the new ones seem to actually do a better job at washing. But often what I would do with Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil is use them as glazes to darken things, either to darken them brown or to darken them black brown. And so now that, since I changed the formula, I think I'll probably just switch back to using the Army Painter Heavy Tone and the whatever their version of black and brown are. And for the color washes, I actually think the Army Painter washes are better than the Games Workshop washes. I have a bunch of Drukhari Nightshade. There's a bunch of the Games Workshop washes, and the color saturation is way, way too high, where it super modifies the color of whatever I'm painting it over, more so than just filling in the recesses and darkening them. And the Army Painter paints don't do that for me, and so I've really, really been enjoying their washes. And of course, Speed Paint is the best product it's the best wargaming product of the decade. I mean, Games Workshop came out with something really cool in their contrast paint line, but they're very, very expensive, and I find Army Painter paints better. The controversial reactivating problem, so here's what the reactivating is. If you put on some Army Painter contrast paint, wait a second, and then you put on some more paint, either like a wet brush, like a wet glaze or something, you will take a little bit of that Army Painter speed paint color and it'll get into the next layer of paint. I never find that an issue. If anything, it helps me blend properly. If you wait a couple of minutes, the paint will have set up fully and you won't really have that rehydrating problem. And I've heard some people complain that like, well, what if the moisture in your hands as you're touching the model? No, the Army Painter speed paint will have cured after about a day, and there's nothing you can do to it that's going to reactivate the paint. But don't take your miniature and run it under the tap while it's still wet, because yes, the paint will come off, but any paint would come off. So I really enjoy Army Painter Speed Paint. Also, I've had some really good success with playing around with the reactivation, especially for doing interesting weathering on weapons. Metallic paints tend to be glossy because that's what makes the glitter that's in those paints really shine, is a gloss finish. And the speed paint on top of gloss, really all acrylic paint on top of a gloss coat is gonna be a lot more fragile. And so I take, a lead belcher or a rune fang steel or a metallic, and then I put the Army Painter Speed Paint on top of it. The paint is a little bit more brittle, and so I can actually take a damp brush and I can add scrapes and scratches in about a second, which is really cool. I mean, if I wanted to do that with using Games Workshop's paints, I would have probably slapped on Nuln Oil and then had to go back in with the Rune Fang Steel and paint in those scratches and highlights. So I've really been enjoying Army Painter Speed Paints. I think they're excellent paints. And Army Painter is a really cool company. Number one, you can actually buy their paint. It's very acquirable. I see them always, almost universally. Are there any friendly local game stores I go to that don't carry Army Painter products? I can't think of any. Which is, I can't say for other companies, like sometimes you have to be like, well, this store carries Vallejo, so if I need a new Vallejo Bone White, I have to go here. If I need an AK Interactive, I go here. I don't know, I can't think of anybody who carries scale 75. And not to say that there's anything wrong with those paints, but if they're hard to get, like if I can't be like, poop, I'm out of the red I like, what do I do right now? How can I fix this? Well, I can drive to the Warhammer store and get it, or I can drive to the gaming bunker. That's probably a real one. I could probably put gaming in any adjective and name someone's gaming store. It's great that Army Painter products are so easy to get. And they actually have some really interesting stuff like their dip washes, which it harkens back to a really old fad from like 2014 maybe, where people were like, Games Workshop washes are too expensive. I've got a big, quart of future floor polish and wood stain. And so I'm going to take my Tyranid Termagant and I'm going to dip it in the floor polish to get it nice and glossy. And then I am going to physically dip it into the wood stain. And in theory, it looked a bit like a wash, but in practice, it was horrible, incredibly messy. I remember somebody had a video where they took a Termagant on like a toothpick and they dipped it, and then they dipped it, and then they put it onto a drill and then just get and then spun the excess wood stain off of their model. Absolutely ridiculous. But I think the dip washes are interesting from Army Painter because almost all models could benefit from either like an Agrax or a Nuln Oil type wash. I just mean black and brown to really bring out some of the details of the sculpt. And so I think those are really interesting products. Army Painter, if you're listening, years ago, Games Workshop made dry paints, and it was a brilliant idea that they failed miserably in execution. Dry brushing is actually a really tricky technique where, it can be tricky and it cannot be tricky. If you literally take a dry brush and you put paint on it, it will deposit paint onto the model, but it will be a little chalky and dusty. The way you properly dry brush is you have to get your paintbrush the exact right moisture level, and then you take on the paint. And that way the paint won't turn into dust and get all over your model. It'll go on beautifully, but that's a really tricky thing to do. And so the Games Workshop dry paints had oils in them that kept the paint a little bit moist. I remember a Necron Compound was the only kind of one that was pretty worthwhile. The only problem is whatever they were using in their paints, the oil would leak out and you would end up with a dry brick that didn't really do much for you. So Army Painter, if you come up with if you can perfect this dry brush paint idea, I think it would be a absolute home run slam dunk product. I would love that. Super useful for things like basing, where I'm always throwing light tans, light grays, browns onto my dry palette to do a little bit of dry brushing. But if all I need to do is take my little Army Painter tin, crack it open, scoop it up with my paintbrush and put it on the base, I would love that. So Army Painter, good on ya. You're a good company. And for me and my hobbying this week, I read the Squat Codex. On Monday, we published a video all about the squat controversy of they got a nerf, just like all codexes have always gotten. But Games Workshop made a really cute video about it. And I haven't read, I read a lot of codexes, but it was really fun in that the squats are a brand spanking new thing. I mean, they did exist 30 years ago. This new squat book had completely new lore, like a brand new thing for the Warhammer 40k universe. And I really enjoyed it. I remember being really pleasantly surprised by the 9th edition Necron Codex. I actually have a video where I read every single Necron Codex ever published, and I found that they were all exactly the same, really. Actually, most of them had all of the same lore. The only one that was a little bit different was the 3.5 Codex, which had the old lore of the Necrons, where they were a slave race to the Catan, star gods, and then in the next book, they were changed so that the roles were reversed, where actually the Imperium and the Eldar got it wrong. Or not the Eldar, because they know what's going on, but the Imperium of Mankind, because the first Codex was written from a third-person perspective looking in at this mysterious race called the Necrons. And it really just felt to me not so much as a retcon or a big lore change, but just more information. Also, the War in Heaven is one of the greatest pieces of writing in all of Warhammer. The War in Heaven is amazing, arguably better than the Horus Heresy. I mean, it also helps that it's like a 5-page story instead of a 50-novel book series. But the Necrons didn't really change that much, but I was very pleasantly surprised after reading the 8th edition Codex. The 9th edition Codex actually had all essentially new lore. Nothing changed, but they updated the words and the explanation and the style of writing. And I was really pleasantly surprised. The 9th edition codexes are well written, and they're not just a rehash of information that was in previous codexes. I mean, the 5th edition codex for the Necrons, the 6th edition codex, the 7th edition codex, and the 8th edition codex all had all of the same words copy-pasted. But the 9th edition codex had new words, and I found that really, really refreshing. And well-written words, and I found that to be absolutely true with the new Squat Codex. Squats are neat. I didn't think that I would enjoy them as much as I do, but I actually really like when hard science fiction is like stretched to almost fantasy science fiction. Like, I really love books like The Martian or Seven Eves, where you have recognizable humanity with recognizable like nowadays technology, but they have to take on challenges that are beyond our current scope. You know, leaving Earth, mining asteroids, landing on moons. It's really, really interesting. And I got a nice taste of that with the Squat Codex, where it read a lot more like not 40K, where everything is almost all fantasy with a little bit of science fiction flair, very Star Wars, where the Leagues of Votann feel a little bit Star Trek. Although probably almost more hard science fiction than Star Trek, because Star Trek is always considered to be the smart science fiction, but there is so much hand-waving in Star Trek of how they do anything. I really, really like the Leagues of Votann. The explanation of their society and how they cooperate with this AI called the Votann, and how they just handle problems in practical and pragmatic ways, and that's how their civilization has been able to continue, as opposed to just, all of the other races are standard fantasy trope, and the reason that they're able to handle space travel and all these things is don't worry about it. How did the Imperium get to space? They made the spaceships a million years ago and it's fine. How did the Eldar travel through space? They made their spaceships a million years ago and they fly, it's fine. But the Leagues of Votann, it's like, well, we need unbelievable amounts of power, so we're going to have to make what's the name? It's a scientific concept of building essentially solar panels around a star. It was in an episode of Star Trek, and Captain Picard made fun of Riker for not knowing what it is, and now I'm Captain Riker because I can't remember the name of it. A Dyson sphere. I didn't just look it up. I remembered that. Definitely, there wasn't a cut. It's perfect. A Dyson sphere where they're able to harvest unbelievable amounts of technology. There was a scientist, it might have been Michikaku, who came up with like the a civilization level 1, level 2, level 3, and humanity is pre-level 1. Like level 1 would be like you can harvest all of the available power, I think, on Earth, and then like a level 2 would be you can harness the power of a star, and then a level 3 is you can harness the energy of a galaxy. And the Squats, they're probably a solid tier 1 civilization. It's really neat. And just the way that they harvest all of the resources from planets and stars. They live near a black hole, and so they have to deal with the physics of that. It's really, really interesting, and I really got a kick out of the Squats. I don't know if I'm gonna be working on a Squat army. Probably not. There's so many 40K armies that I already really, really want. Like, I own a Grey Knight army that needs to be painted. I really want a Sisters of Battle army. I really need to revamp my Gene Stealers because they're a little sad right now. But the squats are a really, really cool thing, and I hope people really, really get a kick out of them. Yes, they did get a nerf and they got some points increases, but I think they'll still be just fine. But you know what else is just fine? That's right, our Patreon. Over there, we have tons of super cool STLs, both miniature and terrain, to fill your wargaming tables, all hosted by Comics, Games, and Things. If you sign up, there's a welcome pack that includes Dawn of War Space Marine, Imperial Guard, and Eldar terrain. We also make one extra episode of Eon's Battle every single week where we take a look at our viewers' models and we give them some helpful critiques, and we have a Patreon-only live stream where we all hop into a Discord server and just chit-chat the night away. We also have merch, link in the description. I really had a fun week of wargaming, and I can't wait to give the Squat Codex another read. Thanks for watching.